I'm Frank Auger, and I'm really happy to be here today to talk to all of you about making onboarding your competitive edge, or at least that's what the slide says. Really, we're just talking about how hard and critical onboarding actually is. And a little bit about me. I've been leading customer success in onboarding teams for almost 2 decades. That makes me either experienced or old or both. I've worked at a bunch of startups, some of which became big companies. Most notably, I spent 10 years on the executive team at Hubspot. I joined Hubspot when they were a small startup, and I built the first post-sales functions there, sold the first upgrade, built the CSM team, the onboarding function, support, whatnot. Done a few startups since then, and today I'm very happy to be the VP of Customer Success at OnRamp. I'm going to talk today about 3 things. Going to start with the B2B onboarding conundrum. No real surprises in this section. Talk about the problems we all face in onboarding. While all of our organizations and our processes and business are different, I think there's some commonalities that we all run into during onboarding. So talk about that a little bit. Talk about what we at OnRamp like to call the 5 onboarding guiding principles, or the 5 OGPs, as I like to refer to them as. Things that we think we should all keep top of mind, no matter what your onboarding program looks like. When you're rethinking it, there's some principles that we think apply across the board. And a little bit about where we can go as an industry, as a function from here. One of the things I love about working in customer success and onboarding all of these years is that we haven't figured it all out yet. I don't know that I agree, with all due respect, to the identity crisis thing. I don't feel like I have an identity crisis. I love CS, and I'll always love CS, but we don't have it all figured out. And why that can be disconcerting, I think it also means that there's still room to innovate. And so talk about that a little bit. Let's start with our customers' motivation and what happens to it right after the sale. When our customers sign up with sales, they come to us hot off the presses, full of excitement and energy. They bought something where they believe in the value that was presented to them and that they paid for, and they want to start receiving that value. And so we introduce them to our onboarding process, and then one meeting at a time, one email at a time, one task at a time, one support ticket at a time, they slip down into the valley of despair, and they start to question whether or not they made the right choice. And then all of us in this room and all of our teams and customer success and onboarding, we work really hard to do whatever it takes to get them to turn the corner and start to see success. And hopefully we can get to a reasonable place before that first renewal. Why? Why do we all chuckle at that? Why have we all seen that? Why does that happen more often than it should? There's a lot of reasons. I think one of the main reasons is that it's relatively easy to become excited about something that you purchase in the hopes and dreams of what it might deliver for you. But to actually turn that into the change that you want to receive, the results that you want to get, you have to do work. You have to take action. What we have to do as CSMs and onboarders is we have to get our customers to take action. Action is work, and work takes time. And nobody has any time, and nobody wants to do any more work, right? And so that's a real problem. Why does our onboarding have to be so much work and take so much time? The answer there is one simple word: complexity. The complexity of everything in our organizations as vendors, the complexity of our people and our teams, the complexity of our systems, the complexity of the processes we ask teams to introduce, we ask our customers to be introduced to. In the last presentation, there were some great slides on how everybody's organization is different, but they were all complex. Nobody's organization and processes are simple. They're all complex. And that complexity makes it very difficult for our customers to get to the success that they want. There's so much friction that is a result of all that complexity. And friction slows you down. And when your relationship with your customer slows down, you run into one big problem right away, and that is you run out of time, right? Nobody here, I suspect, if this isn't true for you, come talk to me after, I want to know your magic, but nobody here has infinite time to spend getting your customer through onboarding. Our onboarding teams have defined time frames with which they have to finish with one customer to be ready to work with the next customer. And if there's too much friction in the process and you slow down too much, then you run out of time. We always run out of time. Customers are partially set up, they're partially successful, their patience starts to wear thin. They maybe don't trust us as much as they did right after they purchased. They're not really all that ready to be handed off to the CSM. If you're a CSM here or you manage CSMs, have you ever received a customer post-onboarding that wasn't all the way set up? Of course. Why does that happen? It happens because that's the way we're structured. Well, this problem is all too common and it's all too costly. Companies with poor onboarding spend twice as much on support in the first 90 days. On top of that, companies with ineffective onboarding face churn rates up to 15% higher. So to spend twice as much on support only to get 15% more churn, I don't think that's anything that any of us are signing up for. So like I said, no surprises in there. To varying degrees, I suspect we've all felt different parts of those problems hit us in our organization. I see heads nodding, so that's good. The real question is, what can we do to solve this problem? How can we create customer onboarding solutions that actually build on the momentum that our customers have coming right out of the sales process, prevent them from falling into that valley of despair, and maybe even do so at scale? So that brings us to our onboarding guiding principles. Everybody's organization is different, and everybody's onboarding has different pros and cons and blockers in it. And what we're going to talk about here is some principles that we think you can think about universally regardless of what your onboarding looks like, and think about how you can apply them where they're going to make the most difference to your individual onboarding. So there's 5 of them. And the first one is customers have to be invested in their onboarding success. And that sounds a little flippant, but actually if you think about it, many times the person who is actually going through your onboarding, the person you're asking to do the work, they may not be the person who purchased the product. They may not be the person who actually cares about the result. In fact, if the product you're selling drives change, the person going through the onboarding may not actually want to change, right? It may be their bosses who want them to change. But it's critical, if we're going to get somebody to do the work and successfully get through onboarding, that they actually care about the successful completion of the onboarding. Very much related to that is that customers care about outcomes, not tasks. I like to think about it this way. Tasks are representations of work, and outcomes are representations of results. And that's not just semantics. Nobody gets rewarded or recognized for completing tasks. If you work on a to-do list and every day you check a bunch of items off your to-do list, your boss does not come by and shake your hand and give you a bonus. You don't get promoted, you don't get recognized, you don't get rewarded for completing tasks. But you do get recognized and rewarded, and you get, even if you don't, you get some self-satisfaction about delivering results and producing outcomes. So take these 2 OGPs together. We think that it's critical when rethinking your onboarding, in order to get the people going through the onboarding to be bought in and invested in the successful completion of the onboarding, we have to structure or restructure our onboardings in the language of the outcomes that the customers care about. Onboarding needs to become a business critical metric. Best way to talk about this is by example. Imagine you're having a conversation with your executive team about increasing sales growth. Can you imagine having a conversation about increasing sales growth without starting that conversation with lead generation and pipeline development? Of course not. First of all, your salespeople would never let you get away without pointing the finger at lead generation. But more importantly, lead generation and pipeline development is the critical, strategic, top of the funnel activity that leads to sales growth. So then why would we have conversations about customer retention and expansion in growth without including in that conversation onboarding, which is the very critical and strategic first top of the funnel step in your customer's success? Now, it seems pretty obvious when you say it that way, but far too often, onboarding is managed as a cost center. It's managed as a, what was the phrase? As a revenue sucker, as something to get completed as quickly and as low cost as possible, right? But really, we need to start thinking about onboarding as a business critical metric. Organizations need actionable onboarding insights. Our VP of Sales, Connor, is back there. You should talk to him later. And if he has a blocker in his sales momentum, he can go into the CRM and he can find charts and graphs and data. He can find exactly where that blocker is, right down to the person. The tooling and the metrics are there and available for him. Can we do that with our onboarding? Or when we're trying to diagnose onboarding stalls and disengaged customers, are we just reading through notes, maybe nicely AI summarized notes, but nonetheless, it's anecdotal information? Do we really have the same level of structured, actionable insights for our onboarding and even for the whole of our customer lifecycle management as we do in our other parts of the business? I don't think we often do. I know that even where I'm at in my company and we work on this, we don't have as much of this as I'd like. I think this is something as an industry we can all aspire to do more of, more actionable onboarding insights. Then lastly, there's scale. We're all being asked to do more with less. I think scale is a very overused word. A lot of times you hear scale used as just synonymous with getting bigger. But being scalable, having a scalable process, isn't just about being bigger. It's about getting better as you get bigger. And the real challenge with scale in all of CS, in my opinion, starts with the coverage mindset that we all have adopted over the years when building out our teams. If you think about your staffing model, hopefully you all have a staffing model, right? You probably started with figuring out the average workload for whatever function you're trying to staff, figuring out the flow of your customers through there, then figuring out what the maximum amount of time a human being in your organization can do, and then you come up with a model, right? And it's a coverage mindset. And that's not bad until you get to next year's budget discussion, and the CFO says, well, now you have to do that with less. So what do? What we do is we go and we look at our customers and we say, well, which customers matter less than other customers? Where can we squeeze our coverage in order to get a little bit more efficiency to satisfy the demand to do more with less? And the result is we create a little bit more efficiency in our model, but at the expense of customer experience. Maybe by one definition, that's scale, but I don't think that's really getting better as you get bigger. I think the answer here is to start to think about putting leverage before coverage. And when I say that, I mean, instead of looking at which customers are less valuable and deserve a less customer experience than others, let's look at which tasks lend themselves to more automation. Which processes can be integrated? Where is there friction we can remove through good orchestration? What are the things we can do leveraging technology across all customers that free up the time for our CS team members to actually spend on the highest value tasks with their customers? If we could get to that, then we could actually create efficiency and scale with no reduction in customer experience. Now that's our 5 OGPs. And one of the nice things about talking about principles is they're conceptual, so it absolves me of the burden of having to talk about how to make any of this real and actually do it in practice, which is really hard. But I do want to talk a little bit about some of the approaches that we're taking today and what we think might be a next step in the iteration of all of this. The first is the helicopter parent, or I like to think of this as the hero model. This is when you have a highly skilled person and you say to them, just do whatever it takes at all costs to make these customers successful. And this works really well for a short amount of time. Although if you've ever had to manage any of these heroes, that's no walk in the park, is it? But that works for a while, but it doesn't scale. It doesn't scale at all. And so once you go down this road for a little bit, it's going to draw you over to a spreadsheet or a project management tool. And you're going to take your onboarding process and you're going to break it up into tasks with milestones and deadlines and checklists. And in direct violation of onboarding guiding principle number 2, you're going to structure your process that you want your customer to go through as just one more to-do list to hand to them. And when that starts to feel a little bit one size fits all for you, then you might toy with the idea of, well, how do I make a custom process, maybe some in-house development, maybe some self-service where each individual can tailor their journey, sort of a choose-your-own-adventure type of model. These are different things that we're all experimenting with. The challenge with these is that the helicopter hero model doesn't scale and it's unpredictable. Project management tools is all about work and not about outcome. And unless you're a software company that's dedicated to building an onboarding product, then this is a very expensive process to build your own bespoke onboarding process. So then, how could this look differently? If we were going to imagine a future of onboarding that looked different, what would it look like? Well, what we think it looks like is it starts with an interaction layer that sits between all the complexity of your teams and your systems and your processes. It sits between them and the customer, and it provides them a clearly orchestrated path from one outcome to the next outcome. Behind the scenes, it automates what can be automated. It integrates what can be integrated. It takes all the complexity of the multiple personalities in your organization and it makes it into a clear and simple path for your customer to follow. That's where we think that we should all be striving to get to. Easier said than done, but not impossible. If we were able to do this, it would change a lot of the conversations that we're having with our customers. Wouldn't it be great if we no longer had to have conversations with customers about why they're confused about what's happening next? Or if we could spend less time nagging and babysitting our customers to get things done. Just the amount of follow-ups that happen in the world of CS is just way too many. If we could move away from that, it'd be great. Now, before I close and go to questions, I want to talk about my favorite concrete use case. I think fixing onboarding and iterating on CS as a practice can sometimes feel like a bit of ocean boiling. There's so many things that we could and should do differently. Where is a good place to start? I think a very good place to start is right at the beginning. And for many of us, right at the beginning is the handoff from sales to post-sales. What typically happens there is an email gets sent introducing the customer. Maybe it's an automated email, maybe it's a manual email, maybe it's the first introduction to the CS team, maybe it's a reintroduction if they've already been introduced. But an email goes out introducing the customer to the people who are going to shepherd them through onboarding. And in that email, there might be a little bit of administrative work that you're asking the customer to do that really is not the best first impression. And the other thing that's in there almost all the time is starting the process of scheduling the kickoff call, right? Onboarding starts with an email followed by a kickoff call. Now, I don't know about you, but if it's today and I need to schedule a meeting for tomorrow, there's a very low probability that my calendar is open tomorrow. And if I need to schedule a meeting with a few people from my company and a few people from another company, if I can get that on my calendar within a week, I count that as a win. Now, if we go all the way back to one of my first slides and we think about that momentum coming out of the sales process, what does a week of waiting to get started do to that momentum? It kills it. Forget about all the different things that we could fix to make our onboarding better. If we could just start by recapturing that precious first week in between the handoff and the kickoff call and give our customers a clear vision of what the first outcome they're working towards is and what the steps they can take to achieve that, that would be fantastic. Now, imagine we iterate on that a few times, and now let's think what a better kickoff call would be like. Today, a kickoff call frequently starts with a bunch of introductions, and then the stakeholder at the customer pontificates for a while on why this project is so important and what all his goals are. And then somebody on the CS team will go through a slide deck of the process and we'll talk a little bit about the work. And then the person at the customer who has to actually go through all the onboarding gets assigned homework. My least favorite word in all of customer success is when we call the things we ask our customers to do homework. But that's what happens. Imagine instead that in the week prior to that kickoff call, the person going through onboarding has made tremendous progress actually accomplishing something. And we spend that start of that kickoff call recognizing the achievements of that person and making them a hero to everybody in the room who didn't even know that any progress was being made yet, right? Again, all this is easier said than done, but we have customers doing it every day. And it takes work, but it is possible. So I would love to talk about this for hours, but I only have 7 minutes left and I want to use it for questions. And so I encourage all of you to come by and see us at the booth. I'd love to learn about the specifics of your onboarding challenges and talk about your thoughts and see what I can learn from you. So with that, we'll go to questions.
That was awesome. Thank you so much, Frank. I really appreciate that. Can you talk more about actionable onboarding insights and what that looks like at your org?
Yeah, I think actionable insights for onboarding is typically identifying the root cause of disengagement, right? The most prevalent challenge in onboarding is that the person going through the onboarding stopped. Whether they stopped completely or they stopped partially, there's some level of disengagement. It's reasonable enough to identify that they stopped, you know that, but why did they stop? What happened prior to that made them stop? Where was the friction in our process that caused them to stop? Identifying those blockers in such a way where you can take action on them. That's what I mean by actionable insights.
That's a great question. Jeff asked bouncing around, I'll just continue with that one. How do you see that interaction layer working more specifically?
I think the main thing about that interaction layer is there's no way that we're going to reduce all the complexity on the back end. There's always going to be more than one system. There's always going to be more than one team. There's always going to be multiple processes. The question is, what do we have to expose to the customer? I think the job of the interaction layer is consolidation. Present a single orchestrated view that takes all the complexity out of all those inevitable myriad of systems and people and processes and give the customer just the next step and just the next step and just the next step. It's a guided tour. In the old days, for those of you who remember when software came with wizards, think of it like a wizard.
Clara asked, how do you get things moving without agenda, milestones, and tasks that your customer needs to do?
Well, I apologize if anything I said made you think that I think agendas and milestones are a bad idea. You do need agendas and milestones to run good meetings. You need milestones to track progress, and at the end of the day, there is work, there is task. I think it's a question of how you present those things. If I give you an agenda that is full of, that is basically complete this checklist, go through this to-do list, then that feels like I'm giving you work. You can complete the same tasks and make progress against the same milestones and have essentially the same agenda, but present it in the language of business outcomes focused on results, and it's very different. And so I think a lot of it is the way we position and structure in the language that we use.
Yeah, good question. Stephanie asked, TTV, time to value, and customer satisfaction surprisingly does not exist the executive leadership team. How do you track onboarding impact?
TTV. Here's the thing about TTV. I'm going to use this question as a launching pad, a soapbox for TTV. We all talk about time to value, but time to value is almost always 80% about time and very little about value. And maybe that's why it does not excite your executive leadership team. Time to value is usually more about time to completion, and it always is subject to running out of time. I think a better metric than time to value and time to completion is time to first customer action. And I think we should be measuring it in minutes. If our goal, and I would posit it should be our goal, is to maintain that momentum coming out of the sales process, then the first thing we want to happen is for our customer to do something that they care about and we care about, and we want it to happen right away in minutes. And so I would propose we just stop worrying about TTV so much the way we do today.
I appreciate your saying that. Last question. What ways has OnRamp used tech to help onboarding?
Our product is a tech product, and it has a lot of automation and orchestration and workflow capabilities that allow you to do many of the things that I showed in that slide with the orchestration and the reduction of complexity. At the end of the day, the enemy is friction. Friction slows you down. Friction causes your customers to stall. Friction is often part of the root cause of customer disengagement, which is our biggest problem. And where we use technology is to help eliminate friction.